Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Transforming Stranded Assets webinar. I am Linda Linder, the managing editor of NJBiz, and I'll be moderating our discussion today, which I'm sure is going to offer us a lot of insight. It's my privilege to be a part of this today, along with our distinguished panel of experts. On hand today, we have Tim Sullivan, CEO of New Jersey Economic Development Authority, Joseph Brancato, the co-chairman of Gensler, John Vasquez, Senior Vice President, Chief Supply Chain Officer and Head of Global Supply Chain and Global Real Estate for Verizon. Aisha Glover will be joining us later, and she is the Vice President of Urban Innovation for Audible. And we have Joe Kelly, the Deputy Chief of Staff for Economic Growth for the Governor of New Jersey. So with that, I will turn it over to Joe. And Joe, please take it from here.
Thanks, Linda, and it's great to be here with everyone. A lot of familiar faces and names in the queue. So wonderful to be here on a topic that many have heard us talk about in the past, and it's been something that's been kind of near and dear to the governor since he was candidate Murphy. Stranded assets or undermanaged assets in the state has been something that's been a kind of a hallmark or keystone of the governor's economic development agenda. And we saw some of this going on in the previous administration, some work being done around the edges, but the governor and Tim and the team have done a really excellent job of trying to put more capital work to, again, help reposition assets, take some of our stranded assets and really punch them up to breathe new life and attract a whole new set of users, whether it's on the commercial side and the residential. And so, as we come out of COVID right now and we start to see, some of the real estate trends, whether it's on the single family residential, multifamily residential, or even an office, we are totally heartened by the magnetism that New Jersey has. And so, I think we'll hear it a lot today from Tim and Joe and John about what's already happening organically in the state and what the governor's vision is to enhance some of what's already happening. I would just say, there's kind of a barbell approach here where, if you think of New Jersey and the kind of low slung suburban office space that was already starting to be repositioned. And now with some of the ARP monies, budget money, and the Economic Recovery Act tax incentives that are out there, we have a real opportunity to take some of those commercial assets and reposition them and position the state and our downtowns for a really vibrant period of growth and turnaround. And then I would say there's also using a lot of those same tools and pockets of either incentives or cash, ways to take undermanaged assets and either help see their transformation, full utilization, or build upon them in new ways. And I know the Gensler team has been outstanding in thinking through some of those options. So I think today what you're going to hear is really the manifestation of a few years now of work on the governor's part, and then what also was happening in the private sector naturally and coming together to really create a great opportunity. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that I'm here in Newark and downtown Newark in our offices, and what's going on around Newark Penn Station at the gateways, what Audible has been doing on that part of the city, and what the mayor's been doing in the outer wards as well. I think speaks to the way that, again, kind of really drilling into these undermanaged assets, stranded assets, and thinking about ways to punch them up, give them new life, and use it as a job spinner and as a way to drive development. It couldn't be a more profound example, as well as what you're seeing in Morris County and Somerset County and Warren County, et cetera. So I will shut up there and turn it over to my colleagues, or as my wife calls Tim Sullivan, the brains of the operation. But I appreciate you guys having me here, and Linda, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks.
The brains of anything.
I think Linda, you're on mute.
Brains of the operation is next, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would accept Joe's wife's declaration that I'm the brains of the operation, but I'll take it all the same. Great to be with everyone. First and foremost, thanks to Joe Kelly, my partner and friend in government, but also Joe Brancato and the team at Gensler for sponsoring this and putting this on. And thanks to Linda for hosting. Joe and the team at Gensler have been great thought partners over the years with the governor and our team in trying to think about this really important policy ambition, which is, as Kelly just described, a longstanding one. This is an issue or a challenge or a kind of a public policy puzzle that existed pre-COVID, and which has been, frankly, kind of actually improved and reshaped and reshifted a little bit by COVID. I think if we were having this conversation 2 years ago, we would have been talking about sort of a paucity of opportunities for what you could do with these assets. And today we're talking, frankly, about how do you kind of manage and air traffic control lots of more opportunities for these kind of assets, whether those are prior retail, kind of transforming retail assets, whether those are suburban office parks that maybe had one big user, 5 or 10 or 15 years ago. The option set, frankly, has improved. And I think that makes this idea that Governor Murphy was focused on going back 2 or 3 years ago as a good idea back then, a really important and really critical idea to be focusing on right now as we round the corner and get into a full sprint of recovery. We got a couple slides to go through. We're kind of wanting to do two things today, sort of in the aggregate. One, want to do a bit of a commercial for a program that the EDA is running right now that Ty Cooper and John Costello and lots of my other colleagues, who I'm sure are listening and watching, are responsible for running, called the 21st Century Redevelopment Program. That is a grant program that Joe Kelly was just referencing around putting some capital to work here. And then also wanted to talk about and then hear from experts, whether that's Aisha, who's first and foremost a member of our board, but also a great partner and friend and colleague and leader in so many areas, but also Verizon and Joe and the team at Gensler. What are some options and opportunities for towns and people who own real estate to be thinking about if they're either the host community or an owner of a site that they've been scratching their head about what to do with for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and how to think about the opportunities that present themselves here. So hopefully this is an opportunity for folks to learn more about our program. So we're fairly transparently trying to do a bit of a promotion and awareness exercise around this 21st Century program, but then also talk about and hopefully kind of begin a dialogue or continue a dialogue around this important public policy challenge. So this really fits into, in the slide that's up right now, it talks about our economic priorities. This goes back to the governor's economic development plan that he put out on October 1st of 2018, which in some ways feels like it was 5 minutes ago, and in some ways feels like it was several decades ago. But really about making investments in people, things like workforce development, things like investing in communities, which is a great example of what we're talking about today, to build world-class cities and towns, to invest in our infrastructure, whether that's hard infrastructure or soft infrastructure, making New Jersey the state of innovation, trying to recapture the leadership position that New Jersey once had, sort of in an unquestioned #1 kind of way. We are still a great source and generator of innovation and innovative companies, but frankly, others have caught up. We want to be #1. The governor's a pretty competitive guy, and he's got a competitive team that works for him. We want to be #1 strongly, and sort of the unquestioned leader in being the state of innovation and building the most diverse and inclusive innovation ecosystem that reflects the wonderful diversity that is a strength of New Jersey. And then things like improving our business climate and making our business climate better. Next slide, please, Jackie. So again, when we think about what are our principles behind how we think about economic development, not just for this 21st Century program, but for the broad spectrum of what we're focused on and working on under the governor's leadership. So again, supporting job creation, really want to think about new job creation, new company formation, new enterprise formation, things like innovation. There's some really good news stories that are happening here. It's a bit under the radar. Maybe NJBiz can write about this one, Linda. The new business formation in New Jersey is up. In the first part of 2021, we're up 40% compared to our pre-pandemic numbers of the number of high propensity business filings, new high propensity business filings that have been made. The rest of the region is only up about 30%. So we're growing faster than the rest of the region from a new company formation perspective. We also really want to focus on our main streets. Again, this was important pre-pandemic. It is critical now post-pandemic to rebuild and strengthen our main streets and our retail corridors. Really want to focus on helping our underserved communities, both from a job creation perspective, but from inequities and inequality perspective, narrowing the wealth gap. The governor just announced leadership of the wealth gap task force that has been being formed over the last couple of months to really focus on these long-standing, deep sort of cyclical and long-standing multi-generational challenges. And then also, as you think about economic development, if you followed economic development reform efforts, obviously a lot of work to be done, or there was a lot of work to be done around improving how we do what we do at the EDA, how the programs that we're responsible for are structured. That's all been built into a lot of these new programs as well. Next slide, please, Jackie. So as we sit here thinking about where we are in kind of mid to late June 2021, and the the landscape continues to shift, and I actually think most of the shifts have been in our favor over the last 12, 24 months, as a consequence of some of the disruptions from the pandemic. The pandemic has accelerated, I think, a revisiting and a refocusing on how to put stranded assets and bring people back home to New Jersey, or bring people back into New Jersey in a big way. Our population growth significantly higher than expected, basically right on national average, or national median for population growth in the census. That's a really good thing, particularly for a kind of an older economy in the grand scheme of America, kind of state where we've got older infrastructure. We're not a Sunbelt state. We're not going to grow at the rate of an Arizona or a Utah or something, because we're New Jersey. We're big. We're one of the largest advanced economies in the world. But those trends are in our favor. As we recover from the pandemic, people and businesses are reimagining sort of what they want from their communities. And New Jersey has a lot of them, has a lot of those options, whether those are suburban towns, whether those are sort of smaller scale cities than a New York or a Philadelphia, but that have the kind of 24/7 or some variant thereof, sort of vibe and look and feel. And we also have a surplus, or a bounty, if you will, of assets and real estate attributes that can be remade. Whether those are suburban office parks that maybe, again, 5, 10, 15 years ago had one big user, that's probably not going to come back. That's not what companies want anymore, to be alone by themselves with no amenities and nothing else in sort of a gated kind of forest. Some people still want that, but most people don't. We also have a shaking out that's happening in retail. And, New Jersey is, for better or for worse, synonymous in a lot of people's minds with malls and strip malls. Some of them are going to go through sort of a change. In their use. Not all of them are going to be what they were 15, 20 years ago. And again, that's a challenge. It's a challenge for the ratables of a given community. It's a challenge for the owners of those assets. But it's also a huge opportunity to think about how we can infuse New Jersey with, frankly, what it needs a little bit more of, what we need a little bit more of, which is more mixed use, more affordable housing, more sort of live, work, play communities, more office sitting right next to residential, sitting right next to retail, sitting right next to restaurants and other sort of supportive amenities. But we've got to get ready for that opportunity. This is it's a sectoral shift that is happening, whether we want it to or not. I think most of it's positive in the aggregate. But we've got to get ready for it. We've got to help our cities and towns get ready for it, because it's really hard. First of all, change is hard in general, just as like human beings. Second, it's really hard to think about how your land use and your planning dynamics shift when uses shift. So something that's been a retail facility for a long time, or it's been a single user office for a long time, and that changes, that's understandably going to create some questions. So we wanted to help, and Governor Murphy is committed to helping our local government entities get ready for this opportunity and think ahead about what they want to see. What do local communities want to see as these assets transform? Because again, it's a hard way to go through life, to be sitting around waiting for a developer to come to you, if you're a mayor or a member of the town council, and say, we've got an idea, do you like it? Tell us what you don't like about it. That's kind of hard. That's not a great way to go through life. If a town is able to promulgate a vision and say, hey, this facility, this office park, this mall, we sure would love to see it become X or Y or Z. And that's not up to me. That's not up to Joe. That's not up to the governor. That's up to the local communities, what they want to see. We want to be able to help folks. So if you go to the next slide, please. We launched this 21st Century Redevelopment Program, which is now taking applications up to $50,000 grants, cash grants to municipalities or economic development agencies or counties, to really put together a plan for, or at least a vision, it's not a plan, to the extent that's a distinction with a difference, for what a mayor and a town and a community want to see happen. And they'll get, winners of this will get technical support from our team at EDA, as well as the great team under the Lieutenant Governor's leadership at DCA, to put together a vision, but to go through a planning exercise. We'd like to see more open space. Would you like to think about what impact the creation of new housing might have on other dimensions of your town? The sort of rental, how does that impact your schools conversation is a sort of an evergreen conversation. It's worth going through and doing that planning exercise. So you're not in the realm of kind of rumors and speculation, but you can do the real work. So again, we wanted to arm and to help cities and towns think about what to do with these assets. And so this 21st Century Redevelopment Program, applications are open now. It's on our website, NJEDA.com. We think it's an exciting tool. It's a pot of money that's actually funded from the Economic Recovery Act, or the incentives bill, if you will, that the governor signed on January 7th of this year. And so it's an exciting program. Next slide, please. Again, there's lots of different things you can do with it. I won't go through them in great detail. You can do, it's a pretty blank canvas. You can propose kind of almost anything related to how to think about a redevelopment exercise. And so we really want to think about all the dimensions that are on this slide, but really thinking about a comprehensive vision for how a town or a community might think about, or a city might think about the future of these sites. Next slide, please. Again, this is all part of, and these redevelopment projects can be supported by a bunch of the new tools, or really sort of a mix and match of the new tools that are on this screen, and a few others that are, again, all included in the Economic Recovery Act of 2020, the incentives bill. I won't go through them in great detail either, but there is a sizable and powerful set of tools to redevelop stranded assets that are built into these programs that we want to work on together. But if you want to access these tools, having a real plan that is thought through and has community support, you're going to be in a hell of a lot better position as a developer or as a municipality if you've done the kind of work that this 21st Century Grant, 21st Century Challenge will position you to do. So I would strongly encourage folks to think about that. Next slide, please. Oh, computer might have frozen, which means maybe my voice is frozen and no one can hear me. Great.
I can hear you, Tim.
Great, thanks.
Don't worry.
I was pretty much done anyway, so maybe I'll hand it back to Linda. I think he's going to facilitate our next conversation, but then happy to
Thanks, Tim.
Stick around and be part of the panel at the end.
Thank you very much, Tim. There's a great means from the EDA to move development forward in the state. So, and you put up a lot of good talking points, which I'm sure we'll get to in the Q&A. Right now, I'd like to turn it over to Joe Brancato for hear from him. Please, Joe, take yourself off mute.
Great, thanks, thanks, Linda. Thanks, Tim, for sharing. As we look ahead to a post-pandemic future, there's one market segment that's currently ripe for redevelopment and transformation: the traditional retail mall. With the massive shift of real estate demand spurred by the pandemic, retail centers will emerge as one of the most valuable asset classes in a post-pandemic landscape. As building owners, investors, and developers look to reposition these aging, vacant, and underutilized properties, converting them into vibrant mixed-use developments that will unlock latent value and meet consumers' rapidly changing demands. Even before the pandemic, retailers were evaluating their physical footprints and shuttering underperforming store locations. COVID-19 accelerated that trend, forcing many retailers to become aggressive with optimizing their portfolios. There is a tremendous opportunity to transform these stranded assets to benefit the occupants, the residents, and the community. And for the next 10 minutes, I'll share a few retail transformation examples, and then I'm going to turn it over to John Vasquez from Verizon, who will share some of the value he's found in their own underutilized office parks. Stranded assets provide the possibility of creating new mixed-use communities. People want to live, work, and shop all within a 20-minute radius. You'll notice these next few examples have a residential component because people want to live near their work rather than hopping on a train for an hour. Many existing malls were disconnected from the community, featuring large buildings with a sea of parking around them, not pedestrian friendly at all. There are environmental, social, and economic benefits by transforming existing retail centers into multi-use environments that are connected to the community. We use 5 key principles to evaluate these assets. One is to modify the anchors. The anchor stores are once the driving factor for shoppers at a retail center. Now many anchors are just a weight on these centers. 2 would be to mix it up, bring in varied uses to a retail center that will attract more foot traffic throughout the day and evening. It'll also provide more reasons to stay longer when you're there. 3rd would be to energize the soft spots in a retail center, targeted interventions in areas that are especially suffering. 4th would be to reimagine mobility. This encompasses so much more than just a car. Alternate forms of transportation, from bikes to public transportation to transportation on demand. I believe creating a pedestrian-oriented development is critical. And the final principle would be to activate landscapes. Connection to the outdoors is ever more critical. Integrating the outdoors into the overall center is important. So creating inviting spaces for activity and pause that the community can use and can enjoy. These 5 principles will create a new heart and soul to these stranded assets. This is the first of 4 examples I'm going to share with you very quickly. We developed a concept for the Galleria at White Plains, a more urban area. The mall was a barrier spanning a few blocks and divided downtown. We turned the mall inside out, creating outward-facing retail and public open space. You can see a photo of the existing mall in the top left. We proposed a mix of uses with the addition of office spaces and possibly some co-work space. We are starting to see our clients look for office space outside the city to support their remote workers. You can see that when this asset was built in the 70s, it instantly divided downtown. It is dark, uninviting, and does not provide a sense of safety. We cut back the existing structure, and we have the retail facing the street, a much more open, pedestrian-oriented streetscape. That's what was proposed. You can see the community space that we had just shared on that previous slide, where we start to open it up for the public, for different community uses. It's used for the occupants, but also for the community all day long. In the evenings can be used as well. Here's a conventional suburban retail center. It's located in Roseville, Minnesota. It's about 1.7 million square feet. You'll see a massive low-rise structure surrounded by a ring road and parking, which cuts off the community on all sides. It's a traditional suburban mall that we have plenty of in New Jersey. Based on a market study, most of the surface parking can become building sites for multi-use with hotel, retail, market rate housing, senior living, medical office, and some traditional office. Parking is reduced due to ride sharing and uses that need less parking, like resi needs less parking than retail. Some surface parking remains, and we added 2 parking garages. You can see residential here over the retail, creating a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week community. You have wide sidewalks and boulevards that encourage walking. We also create and activate landscapes that can be programmed throughout the day and evening and can be utilized by the community. This is a project that converts an existing 3-level, internally focused regional retail center into a creative office campus. It used to be 150 shops anchored by a Macy's and a Nordstrom's on either end. This reminds me also of some of the malls up in North Jersey. The new project will consist of 500,000 square feet of office, 25,000 square feet of retail, and 5,000 square feet of restaurant. You can see this was an internally focused mall. We're turning the building inside out here as well. We're cutting away the structure, which is resulting in at-grade drop-offs and various green spaces throughout the building. The cutouts also enable daylight to penetrate deeper into the floor plate to make it a better office space for people. We are keeping some of the existing parking structure. There's a roof terrace and space at grade that could create a public paseo, a true benefit to the community to pass from one side to the other side. So these type of public amenities become very important. This is all being leased to one corporate tenant. It'll be a tech company. It'll provide very large floor plates, 150,000 square foot floor plates that are hyper flexible, open layouts. And we've really been able to get, by carving away, we've been able to get daylight deep into the interior. Here you can see expansive exterior terraces and patios with wide folding glass walls that create a seamless indoor-outdoor environment. Notice the full height glass walls as well. As you can see in many of these examples that I've just shown, there's a renewed focus on promoting health and well-being. Stairs are strategically located, requiring people to walk and to move. With all of these projects, by using the existing structure we are avoiding CO2 emissions associated with the construction of a new building, and we're also avoiding contributing waste to the landfills. So transformation, as opposed to replacement, is good for our environment. Now I'm going to show you how we're converting a retail strip mall into M Station, Morristown's most significant development in decades, downtown near the train station. One of the things that is really important for successful development for the town and the developer is to engage with the community early on. That's what happened here. And the result incorporates the public opinion. This is a before aerial photo with the green and black roofs to the right, with a huge uninviting parking lot. It's not a great experience as you walk past this site. Well, it's very important to set a new street wall here that gave us 50 feet from the street wall to the building. We dedicated this to the pedestrians, to the retailers and cafes that can have outdoor seating. This new development will improve the pedestrian experience between the train station and up toward the green. Before I pass it along to John Vasquez, I want to just share a highlight. I really want to highlight the importance of getting off on the right foot, to reimagine the possibilities of some of these assets. I know sometimes looking at these assets over and over again, you don't think much can happen. There's a lot that can happen. Hopefully I shared a little bit of what we're doing. First, there should be a visioning session with the key stakeholders, including the developer and the community, to understand all of the needs. And then there should be a strategic evaluation of the highest and best use of the underlying land and demand drivers for adaptive reuse and conversion. Ultimately, we want it to result in developing purpose-driven and impactful ideas that serve both the public and private sector. So with that, I will turn it over now to John Vasquez from Verizon, who will share his experiences on transforming some of Verizon's corporate campuses around the country. John?
And thank you, Joe. I appreciate that introduction. A lot of the work that Verizon's been doing over the past 15 years has been around some of its stranded assets that you see across major cities. And for them, one of them right in Newark, 540 Broad Street, was sold several years ago, where we created a condominium. So at the top of the building could be placed and redesigned into residential and student living with some retail on the ground floor. You talk about some of the old traditional office buildings or central office telephone buildings. They're in some great locations throughout some major cities across the Northeast. We recently completed 140 West Street, New York City, which was a conversion of residential at the top, central office telephone building in the middle, and then full retail and restaurant experiences at the ground level, which fit right into a city landscape. So a lot of this campus work that we've been doing, we've done over 25 of these buildings throughout the Northeast, have been done in a vertical way, a vertical campus, if you will, which touches on all the points that Joe was talking about on the components that are needed. But if we go to the next slide, we have an example here in traditional corporate office. This is in Irving, Texas. This facility was built by Verizon over 25 years ago, surrounded by land, almost protected by a moat, with the same kind of concept almost as some of the malls with a ring road, keep the community out and keep the company in. To get back to an earlier point that was made, this is not the way corporates really want to house employees anymore, especially post-COVID, where we're looking at a hybrid work situation. Our focus on these development projects, which works very well with the projects that Joe was talking about, is about how do you deliver a life experience or life experiences at your place of work. So that work is just another place you go to in a destination. Next slide. So in the case here, and I'll use this as an example, we're actually looking to bring the community in with a residential, retail, and entertainment venue, which includes some commercial office building, but most of it is small commercial and a lot of it is residential. So you create those experiences, not just for those who become occupants of the new development, but that our large traditional office building right next door, that experience will extend into the campus. And that is part of the secret sauce of taking these stranded corporate dinosaurs and really bringing them back to life, and injecting them with a real experience that goes well inside. Next slide. Next slide. So you'll see the real component here is to find the balance between what the neighborhood is looking for. So here we did community engagement. We spoke to what amenities were being sought for by the community, work at the local mayor's office on the development, and really try to focus this on what does the community need? What does the society in that area want as part of it? And then how do we go about building that open space that will attract them to come visit? So at the far end is actually a new office building that we will provide, but our employees will be part of the community. So we don't want that wall, we don't want that barrier to exist anymore. And how do you create a true live, work, play that includes affordable housing, that includes retail, that includes amenity, that's family oriented, that is diverse. And what's also very important is that it's sustainable. So all of these are built around sustainability principles of on-site generation, solar power, gas powered, etc., with sustainable materials as well. Next slide. So you can see that as we go through these, there's a lot that gets done for the development and really creates an environment that attracts people not just to work there, but to live there as well, and adds value to the community. Specifically, this concept is something we've been exploring now at our Basking Ridge facility, where we have an adjacent 9 acres. That is also a very traditional corporate office park, where we are going to look to add residential component, affordable housing component, retail, and amenities that will attract people to the campus, kind of relieve any burden we place on the local communities with the amount of traffic that we can generate and keep that traffic on site. So even improve our footprint there. So a lot of these principles resonate very well with corporate owners and corporate occupiers like Verizon. And I think what's unique is the way Verizon looks at this is that our highest and best use is not just what is the financial performance, but is actually what did we actually give back to society at the end of the day? How did we improve the local economy? And how do we make life better for the people that have housed these facilities for decades? And have we improved their quality of life as well? So we take a very holistic view, and we'll always look to work with the leaders, both from a government leader perspective and local real estate developers, to see what is really the right answer for a lot of these locations. Linda, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, John. Thanks very much on that information on how to bring these areas back to life. Very helpful. And based on that, I believe we have Aisha Glover with us now. Aisha, are you there?
I am.
There she is.
Hello,
nice to see you.
Great to see you. Pleased to be here. I don't have a snazzy slideshow, so I'm gonna talk for my 5-minute allotment. That's okay. And I think kind of maybe just starting off with how we look at reactivating an asset in Newark. And when I say we, I am talking with my Audible hat on. So I'll share a little bit about that. And then very quickly first, who's Audible? Fastest growing employer in the city of Newark. We're proudly headquartered here. The world's largest provider of audiobooks and sound entertainment, and one of the largest employers of actors and talent in the New York City metropolitan area. So we do consider ourselves an anchor in the city and really trying to maximize our social and economic impact here. So I'll quickly just talk about 3 efforts and initiatives underway at Audible as it relates to our broader placemaking and neighborhood impact work. So the three things I'm going to talk about are Newark Working Kitchens, Newark Venture Partners, and the Innovation Cathedral. So the first two really speak to placemaking and job creation, because I believe, and I think we all know, that that's really directly tethered to foot traffic and activations. The last one is more of a direct line back to real estate and stranded assets. So again, I'll start with Newark Working Kitchens. Essentially, it was a COVID response program. We supported 30 restaurants over the past 15 months, providing over 1 million meals. And as much as it was about helping the city's city residents who are food insecure, essentially how the program worked is we pay the restaurants to prepare a certain number of meals, and then those meals go to residents who needed it the most. So the effort was kind of really about retaining businesses and all of Newark's kind of economic gains over recent years. So what we wanted to do is really thoughtfully and intentionally keep the lights on of those restaurants, because quite frankly, we didn't want to come back to vacant storefronts. So over the past year, we raised about $12 million. We kicked in $5 million ourselves. We were fortunate enough to have support from the city of Newark at $500,000 and from NJEDA for $2 million. So we know that vacancy, and this is why I think it's related and why I want to touch on Newark Working Kitchens. We know that vacancies lead to public safety concerns, lead to blight, lead to loss of local tax revenue. So Newark Working Kitchens was essentially a business retention and placemaking solution. So that's one point. The second, around Newark Venture Partners. So Audible, and we are an Amazon subsidiary, we launched Newark Venture Partners about 6 years ago. And NVP is essentially a venture capital fund and accelerator. So they invest directly in early stage tech companies. The idea is, or was initially, to really be thoughtful about how we're helping to catalyze the development of the tech and innovation ecosystem in the city, and more importantly, kind of make sure that those companies are permanently planting roots here. So this is why I wanted to kind of to highlight Newark Venture Partners as well. We've had about 80 startups that have established in Newark, and several have permanently planted their roots. So that's literally hundreds of jobs. Again, more foot traffic and supporting really thriving corridors. So now for the kind of tangible real estate intervention. So when I think about this, like, we could be producing events, which we have. We can invest in public parks, which we have. We could be collaborating with artists on beautification efforts, which we actually just announced a major effort in the city called Newark Artists Collaboration just yesterday, where we're going to be commissioning a bunch of outdoor activities. But even with all of those things, the presence of large, vacant, abandoned assets, we all know, can just have significant impact on a community that some of these lighter touch interventions just can't keep up with. So in December of 2019, we opened a newly renovated adaptive reuse project called the Innovation Cathedral. Sorry, I don't have a beautiful image. You're all in front of your computers. Feel free to hop over to another window. It's the 80,000 square foot church. It was originally built in 1933 as Newark's second Presbyterian church. And it actually had upwards of 10,000 members at its height in probably the middle of the 20th century. So it closed in 1995. A local community group ran it with programs, a charter school, and a daycare until about 2013. And now it houses nearly 500 of our tech employees. So that activation, it's on a major corner right across the street from a park. It kind of acts as an entry point for residential, and so to have much more activity and foot traffic there was really critical to the area. So worth probably also noting that we actually give out incentives to our employees to live in the city. So we give out about $500 a month for people to rent in the city. Again, the value of more boots on the ground and increasing their individual local economic footprint. So I guess just in closing, we're trying to really combine all of these efforts and these direct community and economic investments that we've been making. So we're trying to make sure that as we bring all these under one roof, ultimately is tied back to a thriving, more walkable and active neighborhood. For those that don't know, we're just steps away from Newark Broad Street Station, so not the same activity and traffic as Penn Station. So we're now working directly with landlords, with property owners to really begin to explore how we can provide a safety net for some existing businesses, kind of similar to Newark Working Kitchens, trying to make sure that we're really targeting, attracting new businesses. So all of those have to obviously be combined with some of the large scale reclamation of vacant and abandoned sites and assets, of which we actually have several in our immediate neighborhood. So I just want to commend EDA on the 21st Century Redevelopment Program. I think it really supports municipalities' efforts to envision how they can best repurpose these sites. So I think that that's important to highlight, since the program is really intended to empower cities themselves to shape the plans, right? So obviously at Audible, we're really fortunate in Newark to have phenomenal support and leadership from Mayor Baraka and Deputy Mayor Ladd. So lastly, I guess, because I'm now in the business of storytelling, I'll end by getting us all to just think about the stories that we want to tell about our impact and what we've done both individually and collectively to revitalize our cities.
Thanks, Aisha. And I'm going to open up the Q&A with piggybacking on that for a little bit, just addressing how these stranded assets can bring value to a community, because there are some in a lot of places in New Jersey that are just sitting for years. And I'll open it up to whoever wants to answer this best, but isn't there a lot of red tape that a developer might have to go through before you can even get it shovel ready to, you know, especially the ones that have been sitting for so long? I don't know who might want to touch on that. Joe, you were, you know, talking about the destination zones. Is that something that, you know, developers can easily transform, or is it just a lot?
Joe Kelly or?
I'm sorry, I forgot we had two. Joe Brancato. Or either one.
Well, I think it's, I'm not going to speak to the red tape because but I will speak to.
That would be Joe Kelly.
But it does take time, and it takes time and effort. But I do think if it's done in the right way, with the public sector, the private sector coming together and working with the community to understand the needs and balance those needs with what can be done to make it a sustainable asset, things move along a lot faster. And so I'm positive about this because, you know, some of the stranded assets really do need help now. I mean, they become a safety issue, security. There's a lot of issues that come to play when buildings are left unoccupied and there's not much foot traffic around it. So I do think that there's real opportunity here. And look, there's also, I think there's over 50,000 people that moved out of Manhattan during the last year and a half to New Jersey. And there's certain demands that are starting to come, that are bubbling up. And I think that these stranded assets could be really valuable in a lot of ways to improve that community and take care, but also stranded asset, there could be speed to market here because there's something there if it's done well and approvals can be done in a reasonable time frame.
All right, thank you. And now, Joe Kelly, to you then, are there immediate community development goals, you know, or like what's the governor's long-term vision post-pandemic with those kind of assets?
Sure. So I mean, I'll cover the red tape because why not jump on the grenade? So the funny thing is when when there's ratables on the line or corporate relocation driving some of this, it's amazing how quick local, county, and state bureaucracies will move, right? So I think there's that benefit that is just built into it to those types of opportunities. And then similarly, the governor's thought for a while, we've liked the LSRP plan. We've put money behind permit modernization, digitization of permitting over the past few budgets, and are continuing to do that. So, I mean, I think they're outside of the stranded assets conversation, although it's a great example. There's been a renewed emphasis and focus on making government more efficient. As it relates to the governor's vision and commitment to this, I think Tim hit the nail on the head when he was discussing the Economic Recovery Act. I think there's and Joe also teed it up well. There's not a day that goes by where we're not thinking about, hey, how do we take some of the special sauce that was in Manhattan and Brooklyn over the past decade, and try and create a little bit more of that 15-minute neighborhood that could be, using a stranded asset in a Morristown, for example, as a focal point, or in a Newark. So we're constantly, trying to provide the chum or the incentive for the development, whether it's through brownfield remediation, historic tax credits, the new Aspire program, the Emerge program for corporate relocation to drive that growth, to create that impetus that will move all levels of government. But then we're also thinking about the things that we know are going to attract millennials, going to make neighborhoods cool. So I pick on this one all the time. The scooter share bill that the governor did to help bring, electric scooters to places like, your Hobokens and Newarks and Morristowns, which again kind of is recreating that a little bit of that special sauce that we've seen in your Austins and Brooklyns and what have you. So it's both ends. It's being scrappy, thinking about new policy initiatives like that, and simultaneously providing, again, the big kind of lumpier incentives that you need to make sure, the equity arrangement works for this type of repositioning.
Thanks for that, Joe. We do have a question from our viewers, so it's up for grabs for anyone who might want to answer. How do inorganic communities developed all at once retain or create the authenticity people look for in their communities? Anyone want to touch that?
I'll take a shot at it, and I'll actually take a shot at that, and also sort of wrap it into some of what Joe Kelly was just talking about around the red tape. I think, and I'm saying this mindful that I'm sort of trying to position our program to be helpful. Doing really good planning and having those conversations and sorting out what the community wants is a really good proactive way to, one, cut down on red tape. Most of the sort of the red tape horror stories are in reality, someone's trying to build something the community doesn't really want, but they're sort of tolerating. Well, that's a crummy interaction, and then that's when sort of the red tape, things can come out of the woodwork. But also how a community sort of evolves and what it wants to see happen, what the people who live there a long time or have just recently moved to the neighborhood want to see, can only be harnessed and sort of brought forth via a real planning process, and things like charrettes and things like community conversations, where you say, okay, we've got this parcel that's been, playing whatever role it's been playing in our community for a long time. It's going to change. It's not going to be the same thing. That conversation is hard enough in its own right, of like, it's been a retail institution, it's probably not going to be that anymore, or it's been a office building, it's going to be something different. But what do you all want to see here? There's almost an infinite number of opportunities. Having those frankly hard conversations, some of those decision-making exercises early is how you can realize a real vision, as opposed to sort of waiting for someone to call you up and say, we've got an idea, tell us what you don't like about it. I think that's one of the sort of most holistic and thoughtful ways to approach it.
Great, thanks, Tim. That helps. Nick,
Quickly. Oh, sorry. You want
go ahead, Aisha.
Okay, I'll just quickly add. I don't know that any city has gotten it right. It is a challenge, because you want development, you want to support and attract certain businesses, but you don't want that to have the adverse effect of displacement. You want to still be gritty and creative and artistic, and I'm thinking of Newark, so those are my adjectives, and innovative and all that, and you want it to feel real. But the reality is there's so many examples of when development has caused this displacement, or if it's been overly curated or highly manufactured, and then it feels like any town USA, right? And so that's like the natural tension and struggle. And I think Tim is right in that community engagement and that input is key, but then also thinking about how realistic it is. Once you know what the community wants, how do we ensure that that those sites, that the retail, let's say, remains accessible, right? And so it is a delicate balance. I don't know that anyone has gotten it right. And even in a city like Newark with, you know, phenomenal leadership and willpower and all that, we see the tension that it has caused. So I think it starts being of that mind and knowing what you want and what you're trying to help curate, and then ensuring that there are safety nets, that there are policies, that there are protections to really help preserve that authenticity and what makes these neighborhoods so unique and dynamic in the first place.
You're absolutely right. And it is a delicate balance. And then we're talking some of the major cities, and I'm going to ask John Vasquez to step in here and help me out here. You've done real estate, commercial real estate for outside of major cities. How do you make those places outside the major cities? How do you activate the real estate in there? And then how do you make it attractive for people to come to work there, live there, play there, you know, if they're not major, like Newark, Camden, wherever else. We're going to talk about Morristown. So John, if you can speak to that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think part of it is absolutely the engagement with the local community, but also at the state level too, because there are you know, master plans from a state perspective. So really understand the constituent base there, but then understand as a corporate owner occupier in that space. And we have significant real estate holdings, so we get to really be engaged in our local communities and try and make it work for our employees. Is understand what employees want in the communities that they live, and more people want to live close to where they work. And it's not everyone moving to a city, which is great, but it's also in the suburbs. And how do you handle that? We actively engage our employees, and we ask them specifically on the Basking Ridge perspective, what would you like to see? What would make sense for you? And then we work with the local town and say what makes sense with the town, both the government leadership and the people who live there. But then the other part that we do that's a little bit unique and different is we don't just work with our development partners and turn it over, because then the problem is then these become a financial exercise, a return on equity. And if sometimes these programs won't make money, but they'll make great partners in the community, we go in and we maintain an equity position, but we also own the retail. And to Aisha's point, and I love the work that's being done in Newark, and I want to talk with her some more about that, because I think that's a fantastic idea, is we, in Dallas as an example, we own the retail experience, and we are giving space to local restaurant owners who either don't have a business or have lost their business, and we'll provide a standard kitchen for them and let them operate out of that and get themselves back on their foot, and we'll pay for it. We can afford to pay for that. But you know what? More than about the money, it creates such goodwill. It's the right thing to do, that your employees want to be a part of that, and that just creates a draw both ways with the local community. Engage with your employees at that location. You're all in the same space, and that's one of the ways we're finding the balance around that. Make the investment in there, be a part of it, and own it. We own. We have an obligation to our neighbors. We have an obligation to society, and we take that seriously.
Thank you. Next question is for Tim Sullivan. What right now would you say are the best steps community leaders and development professionals can take to prepare to participate in, you have so many NJEDA programs, that are currently open, or, so what are those steps?
Yeah, I'd say one of them is come talk to us early on. Again, we have a new and frankly ever growing set of tools in our toolkit, and some are going to work in some circumstances and some are not. And I think meeting with either a municipality or with a developer or some combination thereof early on when you're thinking about what you sort of are trying to pursue, and let us help kind of use a jigsaw to build a custom piece of support can be helpful, as opposed to coming a recipe that is, if not doomed, very complicated, is coming to us at the end of a project being like, we have this very specific problem that is left over that we haven't been able to solve yet. Can you help us solve that? Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't, but this is government, and so we're constrained by what our statutes say we can do. If we're able to work earlier on, we're usually able to help steer around some of the hurdles, some of the challenges that can exist. And so, the earlier we can be engaged with a development team, with a municipality, with a mayor, the deputy mayor, whoever the right leader is from the city side, town side, all the better. Okay,
great. Thanks, Tim. Joe B, for you, I'd like to know how, like in this post-COVID world, everybody's talking about the healthy buildings. How would you go about, or do you go about transforming and designing a mall or office building so it becomes a community asset, someplace that supports healthy living for everybody that's there?
Yeah. Well, when you just think about health and well-being, Well Building Institute was here before the pandemic. It just from a health standpoint of these buildings, I think the Well Building Institute is going to be very busy now because people are looking at different things, whether it's the indoor air quality or just forcing people to move and strategically locating architecture to make people move, ergonomically in many different ways. But I think that from a sharing of the community, sharing the buildings with community, I think there's a lot of assets. I mean, it could be outdoor space. It could be spaces now. We're designing some buildings on the West Coast that we're creating it so that off hours, after hours, the lobbies are transformed for community uses. There's, we just finished the repositioning of the Citibank's headquarters here down in New York, and they have a world-class audiovisual town hall space, and they're sharing that with the community off hours. So there's certain things that can be shared with the community that fill a need. On some of those retail center master plans, there's a lot of outdoor green space that used to be parking lots and asphalt parking lots that are used for, whether it's for entertainment or fields or for concerts, that during the day they're used, like you see behind me. This is a project we worked on in LA for Crusoe Development. There's a lot of green spaces throughout the development, and it's used for people. People may go there not to shop that day, but to meet somebody and hang out. But lots of times they're shopping too. So I think we got to be able to share the asset with the community, and I think that's why if we talk to the community, we have a good understanding. And there's certain givebacks. There's certain givebacks in terms of how we share that facility, because none of these facilities are used 24 hours a day, and we could probably get a little more out of these facilities in terms of utilization.
Excellent, thank you. And believe it or not, we're running out of time, so I am going to ask, does anyone have any final points that they'd like to make? Or if not, then I will say our thank yous. No? Okay, well, you've all been really great. I want to thank everyone for your time today. It's been my pleasure to have been a part of this. And I'd also like to just say it's great insight and ideas. And you've all made yourself so accessible and given a lot of food for thought. Thank you to Gensler for putting this discussion together. And I hope that we can see you all in person next time. So I'm Linda Lindner. Until next, be well. Bye.
Thanks, Linda. Thanks, team.
Thank you. Thanks all.